Oh, shit.
Hello and welcome to Spoiled Games. This is part 2 of our discussion of one of the finest games of this year, maybe in the minds of some of these guys in even larger span of time, The Last of Us. The first one, we really focused on the story, the remarkable story. We wanted to also talk about the gameplay, which is kind of essential to uphold the worthiness of the narrative. And joining us again, senior producer from Red 3 Games, Zach Miner.
Thank you very much.
And from Kotaku, Kirk Hamilton.
Hello.
I think what we've talked about a lot, and I think you really felt this with BioShock Infinite, another game that's got a lot of critical acclaim, is there can be a disconnect. I think a lot of people saw it in Naughty Dog's Uncharted series, that here you have this fabulous story, and it's almost like the gameplay is separate, or the gameplay, by what happens, undermines the integrity of character. I think this is one of the rare instances, or maybe one of the fewest instances, where I've ever seen the two just work perfectly hand in hand.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, the gameplay is so brutal, and especially in the beginning, you're so short on supplies, right? I mean, it's just like you are dreading going from encounter to encounter because you fear that you're going to come across a room where there's 2 more infected than you have shivs, right? And especially the nature in which those combat sequences are portrayed, I think just matches how dark the world really is.
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be some kind of disconnect. Like, there's no way that you could believe that that one person could realistically kill. I mean, you don't kill the hundreds of people that you kill in Uncharted, but in Pittsburgh, you probably kill like 50 guys or something. Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But only if you think about it in that kind of way. Like, if you really look at what happened and try to, is this believable? Or is this realistic, I should say. I think the big thing in this game, and that most games that do this well go for, is it's more believable than it is realistic. Like, the facts of the matter aren't realistic. Like, that a guy could do this, that he could take a bullet and then just patch himself up and be okay. Like, it's still a video game, but it feels so believable a lot of the time that I think that's like Naughty Dog's great achievement here, is that it's their alchemy to make it feel believable really works for the majority of the game.
Mm-hmm. And the desperation and the sociopathy on display in the cutscenes, I feel like it almost encourages you, or at least it well informs that logic when you're playing the game. That sense of desperation. That, okay, I have these supplies, but if I'm going to get it through the sequence, because there are more than enough times where I thought I had everything under control. No, the AI will find me, and you're going to just start using those supplies in kind of a wild panic to extricate yourself from that situation and get going. I think I felt like the story played a trick on me to start playing it in that manner.
Yeah, I do also like that a lot of the encounters are optional. I mean, stealth is obviously a big part of the game, as are the stealth takedowns, but there's a lot of encounters that I just snuck by on. I know we
that
played
whole
differently.
thing at the bookstore, you can sneak through that entire bookstore and not fight a single dude if you know where you're going.
And that does become more essential on the harder difficulties.
Yeah.
Like,
and
you just don't have the resources to take care of it.
And that's been my thing with this game, is playing it on hard, and especially playing on hard. Now I'm trying it. Some commenters were saying they do this where you turn off the listening mode, play it on hard, or I haven't really played very much on Survivor on the hardest. But then the game gets crazy and is really, really cool. I think it shows how much thought they put into making it more difficult without being impossible. Little things like, I think I noticed, that first infected encounter you have where there's the clicker and you realize the clickers kill you in one hit, and then you're like, oh my god, like you just get killed like so many times. It's like this terrifying encounter. So when you play that on normal, you go into the room, and then there's a lead pipe waiting for you, which has like 6 hits or something. It's pretty useful. And if you play it on hard, there's a board, and it has like 4 hits. It's like, to that degree, the difference between hard and medium. And hard is really great. And because on hard also, when you're scavenging, man, like you'll like sacrifice a shiv to go into a room, and there's like 20 parts and like a bullet and maybe like a half a thing of like lighter fluid or something. Like that's all you get. And it really can feel very stingy.
I think, and speaking of that first encounter that you have, I mean, it highlights how with so few enemy types, which I think grounds the believability, for lack of a better word, they are zombies, but okay, we have the runners who are affected by certain types of noise, and then you have the clickers, which you just kind of want to get rid of as quickly as possible.
But the runners can see you, so the clickers can't.
Yeah, and so I mean, it opens up like how interesting and challenging that they could do that. And then you add in the human AI, which I felt for the most part was quite good.
Very good.
That's how you had. This was not a game where I ever went, Oh, there's a lack of variety.
And they did the Half-Life 2 thing, right? I feel like people are learning this from Valve, is that Valve did such a good job with Half-Life 2 of having you, 1 minute you're fighting Combine soldiers, and that's one whole thing, and you're using one weapon set and like dealing with one set of tactics, and then the next minute you're up against zombies and monsters underground, then suddenly you've got your shotgun out and your flashlight and you're trying to do this whole other thing. And they did a really good job of that here. The only thing I didn't see, which I only noticed when I thought about it, was there was never a scene where you had to take on both. Like they never had both humans and zombies in the same room, or where you could trick humans into running into zombies.
Oh, yeah.
That's the kind of thing Valve does really well, that for whatever reason, maybe they couldn't get it all processing at the same time. They didn't
Within the narrative, that might have been a tough one to...
They could have done it. That would have been
but
awesome.
the idea is that
like, if they
where you
had done
saw
it.
humans, they have, for the most part, cleared it out, fortified themselves.
Right.
And they could have done the classic, oh no, they're coming over the walls.
That would have been cool.
Which
like,
isn't exactly... Well, these were some of the least... determined zombies I've ever seen in the game.
Yeah.
They're kind of like,
Right. Well, they're mostly just sitting around sleeping. And
Yeah.
I really did think it was cool how the different types of encounters felt so very different.
And I did find myself missing the encounters with the infected. Like, I mean, from almost all of Pittsburgh, aside from a couple sequences, you're fighting humans.
Yeah.
And I did find myself like, oh, I kind of miss the dynamic of coming up on a group of infected and
that whole thing
clickers. Yeah, because that, I don't know, stealth games are some of my favorite games, and so I do like that puzzle piece of, you know, throwing the bottle over here and you move those two and then you can sneak by this way and take this one out, you know.
But I mean, I loved it with the humans, and especially kind of in the bookstore, where with those multi-levels, and
That was a great level.
there is no way that you can maintain control of that entire situation. I mean, and it's funny, I've never seen level design kind of inform that they're moving
pushes
the
and
AI
pulls
around.
a lot. And it's funny, like I've gotten really good at that level. I've played it a whole bunch of times to the point where I just never, like, I just ruin guys like through it. And so there is a point where, and I do think this game is really, really well designed. I think that, and the level design, like I think the level design is awesome.
exquisite.
Like how big it is and how there's always room to get spotted and run, and like that's all very, very cool. It doesn't have, I mean, it's not Dark Souls, right? Like it's not designed to that level of like incredibleness where you can play it just forever and you'll never truly master it because it's so brilliant. Like I'm getting to the point with the game where I'm so good at some of those levels because I've just played them a bunch of times and I know exactly what the dudes are going to do and how to use my tools, that it's no longer very rewarding. But that's only because, I mean, you know, I played it like,
like I played it,
but the first time through, and here's something interesting. I thought some people were complaining about how linear the game is because obviously it's a linear game. But I don't know about you guys, but I got lost a lot and just discombobulated in a lot of those underground areas where I just didn't know where the exit was, and it was terrifying. Like I had, you know, like I felt like it was actually a very disorienting game.
This for whatever non-linearity, which of course supports the amazing storytelling there. The diversity of movement within the various combat spaces and areas was so well thought out that I think that if you tried to go even broader, it would have undermined that aspect that made everything feel taut, that you could get out of it, but then with the way the AI behaved, there's always something there to upset your sense of confidence.
Yeah, totally. And I'm glad that you brought up Dark Souls because I do think that it does pull on some of those strings. You know,
especially on that hard difficulty. Like,
yeah,
it really starts to feel like that terror.
Right, and like by having all the crafting happen, you know, without pausing the game, with that being another dynamic that you have to juggle while, you know, there's maybe 4 enemies above you and you have to heal yourself.
And it's funny, you know there are going to be some, because like you can't really compare this game to Dark Souls. Like there are totally like Dark Souls, the hardcore Dark Souls people are going to be like, what the fuck are these guys talking about? This is like some Uncharted bullcrap movie game compared to Dark Souls, which is this, you know, immaculate work of genius. Okay. But like you're right, and it's a survival horror thing too, that kind of real-time inventory.
Yeah.
See, I mean, but I felt that so many things, stealth, survival horror, I mean, those to me have become codified to mean that I'm playing a game very slowly, or that, you know, that there's this kind of almost like this artifice imposed upon sort of the restrictions of what I can carry. That's forcing challenge. I mean, those were so. They made it easy to understand on the player and to kind of go with it, and especially with the resources where it's not like I got to hold on to that. No, you're going to be using it. I mean, there's these wonderful rearticulations of these kind of, you know, game genre conventions that I don't know if anyone else can replicate it, but it says they're not necessary.
The inventory and crafting stuff was really well balanced. I mean, this is a rare game where I used every single thing that I had all the time and was constantly running out of stuff, and it never felt, except the flamethrower. I've never used the flamethrower in the game. It's the only thing I've ever used.
I found in the final sequence, in Salt Lake City.
Oh, okay.
When you're in the tunnel, where it's like, okay, that's a lot of dudes. Better start dealing with them.
Yeah, I snuck around them.
Okay, and I didn't know, and I felt at that point, it's like, I don't like you infected things. I'm going to go ahead and do what I think the game wants me to do.
Right.
Just have a full
Because it just gave you a bunch of flamethrower ammo right
It
before
did,
that.
yeah. And that actually brings up one of the things that I don't think I liked about the combat, which was that there was that heavy. So that was when they first introduced that.
It's one of the most forced combat scenes in the game.
It is.
In the
and
gym, even.
You have no choice, but you have to kill it, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of an annoying fight. Like,
It is.
You're just running around in circles and like throwing Molotov cocktails, and it
Totally.
just feels a little like.
Yeah, it felt like they needed to have we need to keep escalating it, right?
And there is another moment, that moment where you start the generator underground, and then the huge fucker comes out, and you're like, oh my god, like I'm
See,
hosed.
that one
was
I
a
really
great
liked.
moment. 'Cause
That I
you
really
can't
liked.
really fight him like her.
No,
I
you
didn't
have to
anyway.
run,
Like I was
right?
like that was great. Like,
Yeah.
but
And that's
yeah,
one of the places where you get really discombobulated. I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
on purpose.
yeah.
Where it's like,
Oh, yeah, I
do I have
hated
to
that
go back
area,
that way? Or one thing I think we really need to talk about is the violence in the game.
Yeah.
I think it is a point of great discussion. I've never seen a game this violent, but I've also never seen one that justifies its violence.
which is weird, right? That it's
Yeah.
both. It probably was the most violent game I've ever played. Like
it's
God.
it's the intimacy.
Yeah, and just brutality. I mean, and the way they've made it so real. Like, man, it's like just not fun to watch or look at or even play.
And I think that is a huge recalibration of sort of the role that you can use violence in games that isn't just supposed to be visceral. Though I will admit, when things were really tense, there was a visceral satisfaction of smashing some guy's head into the wall, and then a moment of, oh, I don't like that I just had that.
Oh, I remember
reaction to
the
it.
last game to make me feel that way was Max Payne 3, where like that was probably the most violent game I've played before this one. And of course, that was like John Woo over the top. But there are parts in that game where it's so slow-mo, blood everywhere. But then I would have that same uncomfortable feeling of like really being into it. Like the fact that you're like killing these people really, I mean, it's not cool really. It's like not a good thing, but it's there. Like it's definitely a.
I mean, that game too has really hard sections, and that explosion of violence is some sort of catharsis. Like,
Right,
I mean, there's a release that happens there.
It reminds me a little of Takeshi Kitano in a lot of his gangster
Yes.
movies, where there's just kind of a slow simmer, explosion,
Extreme-
Chopsticks through the nose.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that as we talked about the story at length. We've talked about gameplay. I mean, in every way, this represents a maturation, right, of what Naughty Dog has done.
And I think what a lot of games have done. I mean, I think it forwards the conversation that we've all been struggling to see games move forward.
And it's funny, we're being very congratulatory to The Last of Us, which is cool. It deserves it. At the same time, I do feel a frustration with this game. The more I play it and the more I look at it, that this game is like the people who make games, human beings, we have gotten super good at making this shit, like at this thing, like the game that's like the action and the stealth and the storytelling and the cutscenes and the rhythm of it, like we are awesome at that. And that's awesome, like it's great that we're really good at that. But there is also like, okay, we're finally there. We've the ultimate daddening game, the ultimate like stealth horror zombie game, the ultimate thing. Maybe it would be cool to do something totally different now.
No, and maybe we are finally doing that perfection
Right.
of it. As I've said before, if you go look at epic poetry, if you look at sort of, during the Renaissance in terms of the formalism of poetry and of plays, that, if you look at sort of certain art forms, they have to go through this highly iterative process to finally get to that, okay, now we can freeform it
we
and just
did
see
it,
where
like,
we go.
let's do something new.
And I do think The Last of Us is one of the first indications of like, that's the best. Yeah, do we need to go back and do it
Because
again?
so
We need to
long
do
to
like
turn
a-
these things around,
yeah.
like we need that time.
I
to
know
kinda
we're
get
expecting
there.
to see some DLC. I'm not saying I'm not going to play it, but I just feel that The Last of Us was so well composed. I don't need more The Last of Us.
Right, I hear you. I think they'll probably make a sequel, but I don't think. This is another thing I'll probably write about. I don't think they need a sequel. I like how like Enslaved didn't have a sequel; it ended. I thought that was cool. Like I feel the same way with this game. Like I got enough of it. Though I'm sure if they do a sequel and it maybe stars Ellie or something, and it's a whole other story and it's really cool, I'll totally play it.
Yeah. But they'll probably be a little ways off.
Yeah,
If anything, I
Let's
would like
park before
everybody
the
at Naughty
horse,
Dog
right?
to take a deep breath.
Chill, go on vacation.
And that will be the conclusion of our discussion of The Last of Us, at least for the course of spoiled games. I have every reason to believe this game, as with BioShock Infinite and a handful more that are going to come out, will be points of reemergence of both positive and negative discussion. Kirk, Kirk, thank you so much for your time.
Cheers,
Zach,
thanks for
thank
having
you
me.
for joining us here. Okay, well that's it. The Last of Us Unspoiled Games. Hope you enjoyed it. Like I've said before, hope you played it because that's something you need to have done. Once again, we're going to be talking about more games throughout the course of the year. Thanks for joining us. See you soon.